Clara Ara Halloway learned very early that silence was survival. In the Blackwood Pack, silence kept servants alive. It kept their bones unbroken, their bellies occasionally fed, and their spirits just barely intact enough to wake each morning before dawn. She kept her head lowered as she scrubbed the marble floors of the grand hall, long before the moon banners were hung, long before the guests arrived in their silk and ceremony, and long before her fate decided to reveal itself in the cruelest way imaginable. No wolf bothered learning her name. She was unranked, unmated, unclaimed. Before we begin, if you love dark Lycan kings, forbidden mates, and stories that make your heart ache, like this video, subscribe, and step into the pack, because these stories only get deeper from here. An orphan taken in after a border skirmish 18 years ago, or so the official records said. A charity case, a burden the pack carried with barely concealed contempt. The truth was buried deeper than memory, locked away in sealed archives and whispered conversations that died the moment she entered a room. Tonight was the Mating Moon Gala, the most sacred event of the year. Under the full moon's blessing, bonds would be announced, political alliances sealed, futures decided with the weight of centuries of tradition. And Clara was not meant to be part of any of it. Her role was simple: scrub, polish, disappear, be invisible until needed, then vanish again like smoke. "Omega," a guard snapped from the doorway, his voice sharp with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never questioned his place in the hierarchy. "You missed a spot near the dais." She bowed instantly, keeping her eyes on the floor. "Yes, sir. My apologies." Her wolf stirred uneasily beneath her ribs. Not weak, not broken, just waiting. Always waiting for something Clara Ara couldn't name. Sometimes in the deep hours of night, she felt her wolf pacing, restless, like a caged creature that remembered freedom but couldn't recall what it looked like. The other servants whispered about her sometimes, about how her eyes occasionally flashed gold when she was startled, about how plants seemed to grow faster in the kitchen garden where she worked, about the way the pack dogs never barked at her, only watched with knowing eyes. Superstitious nonsense, the head housekeeper always said. The girl's just odd. Leave her be. As the moon rose higher, power hummed through the air in a way Clara Ara had never felt before. The chandeliers glowed brighter, their crystals singing with resonance. The ancient stones of the pack house seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Every wolf in the territory felt it, that electric pull, that sacred recognition that tonight was different. The pack buzzed with anticipation, voices rising in excited murmurs as nobles and dignitaries arrived in gleaming cars, their designer clothes and practiced smiles speaking of power and privilege Clara Ara could scarcely imagine. And somewhere deep inside her chest, beneath the layers of learned submission and carefully cultivated invisibility, something ancient stirred, something that had been sleeping for a very, very long time. The marble beneath her hands felt warmer than it should. When she pressed down to scrub away a stubborn stain, tiny hairline fractures appeared in the stone, so small she convinced herself she'd imagined them. But her wolf noticed. Her wolf was waking up. Dominic Sterling stood at the center of the grand hall like he owned the moon itself, and in many ways he did. newly crowned alpha at 26, broad-shouldered with the kind of classical features that graced pack history paintings, perfect smile that had been practiced since childhood, a future mapped out by advisors and approved by the council before he could even walk. He wore power like a second skin, comfortable, natural, unquestioned. Beside him stood Tiffany Rochute, draped in silver silk that caught the candlelight like captured moonbeams. Daughter of the Silver Crest Alpha, bred from birth for exactly this moment. Every gesture calculated, ambition shining in her pale blue eyes like a blade waiting to be drawn. The crowd waited in hushed reverence. Over 300 wolves packed into the grand hall, their formal attire glittering with jewels and status symbols. The air was thick with expensive perfumes, and the electric anticipation that came before a historic announcement. Clara Ara watched from behind a marble column near the kitchen entrance, her cleaning supplies abandoned. She shouldn't be here. Servants weren't permitted to witness the ceremony, but something had rooted her feet to this spot, something she couldn't explain or resist. Dominic lifted his hand, and the room fell into absolute silence. "Tonight," he began, his voice carrying the practiced resonance of alpha command, "I announce my chosen mate, the future Luna of Blackwood Pax, the alliance that will secure our prosperity for generations to come." Clara Ara felt it before he said anything more. The bond, sharp, violent, awakening like a blade thrust through her soul. Every nerve ending ignited, her vision blurred, then sharpened with supernatural clarity. The world tilted, and suddenly she could hear Dominic's heartbeat from across the massive hall, could smell the bergamot in his cologne, could feel the warmth of his skin as if she were standing beside him instead of hidden in shadows 50 feet away. Mate. The word thundered through her consciousness in a voice that wasn't quite her own. Her wolf surged forward with recognition so powerful it nearly drove Clara Ara to her knees. No, that was impossible. Alphas didn't bond with Omegas. The hierarchy was absolute, sacred. Written into the very fabric of pack law and wolf nature. But the bond didn't care about hierarchy. It was inevitable as gravity. Dominic's eyes flicked toward her, not with warmth, not with recognition or joy, but with pure, undisguised irritation, like she was an insect that had crawled across his perfect moment. The hall froze. 300 wolves turned to follow their alpha's gaze. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. "You," he said coldly, pointing directly at Clara with one long finger. "Step forward." Every instinct screamed to run, to flee into the night and never look back, to preserve what little dignity she had left before he destroyed it publicly. Instead, Clara obeyed, because that's what Omegas did. They obeyed. Her legs carried her forward on shaking limbs. Through the parting crowd that recoiled as if she carried disease, whispers erupted on all sides, sharp and cutting. "The servant girl? Impossible. There must be some mistake. She's unranked." Tiffany's face had gone pale, then red with rage. Her carefully manicured hand clutched Dominic's arm possessively. Clara reached the dais and stopped, unable to raise her eyes. The bond pulled tighter, singing through her blood, urging her to step closer, to touch him, to complete the recognition. She fought it with everything she had. Dominic looked down at her with the kind of disgust usually reserved for something scraped off a shoe. "Look at me," he commanded. She raised her eyes. For just a moment, one fleeting heartbeat, she saw it. The recognition in his eyes, the bond hitting him like a freight train. The momentary flash of confusion, of wonder, of the sacred acknowledgement that every wolf dreamed of. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. He'd made his choice before the bond snapped into place, and no fate-given connection would make him unmake it. The words came like an execution. "I reject you, Clara Holloway." His voice was steady, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this moment. The bond shattered. Pain exploded through her chest, ripping a scream from her throat that she desperately tried to swallow. It felt like her soul was being torn in half, like every nerve was being set aflame, like dying and surviving death simultaneously. She collapsed forward, catching herself on trembling hands. "You are weak," Dominic continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Unranked, unworthy. An Omega servant with no bloodline worth naming, no pack standing, no value to this territory." Tiffany smiled then, a vicious, triumphant expression that would haunt Clara Ara's nightmares for years. "I will not disgrace my reign by claiming trash," Dominic finished. "I will not allow the moon goddess's mistake to destroy everything my family has built. I choose alliance. I choose strength. I choose Silvercrest and the future they represent." The crowd erupted in applause. Not everyone. Some wolves looked uncomfortable, uncertain. Rejection of a true mate bond was serious. Sacred laws existed around such things, but Dominic was alpha, and the alpha's word was law. Laughter followed his declaration. Cruel, mocking laughter from wolves who'd never questioned their place in the world, and never would. Clara Ara collapsed fully to her knees, her forehead nearly touching the marble. Blood dripped from her nose, the physical manifestation of a bond violently severed. Her chest felt hollow, like something essential had been carved out and discarded. Her wolf did not whimper. It growled, deep, furious, ancient. The sound that emerged from her throat wasn't quite human, wasn't quite wolf either. It was something older, something that made several of the nearest wolves stumble backward in instinctive fear. And then the ground shook. It started small, just a tremor, barely noticeable. Then the chandeliers began to sway. Cracks appeared in the marble beneath Clarara's hands, spreading like lightning strikes across the polished floor. "What?" Dominic began. The windows exploded inward. Glass rained down like diamonds catching moonlight. The torches flickered, their flames turning from orange to gold to pure white. Stone cracked beneath Clara Ara's hands with sounds like gunshots. The cracks spread, racing across the floor, up the walls, spiderwebbing across the ancient foundation of the pack house. Markings, glowing, shifting sigils in languages dead for millennia, ignited across her arms, her neck, her spine. They burned through her clothing without consuming it, luminous script that pulsed in rhythm with her racing heart. The air became heavy, oppressive, thick with a power that made breathing difficult. Every wolf in the hall felt it pressing down on them like a physical weight, demanding submission, commanding recognition. Dominic staggered backward, his alpha confidence crumbling. "What? "What is this?" A presence descended, vast, royal, crushing, not divine, but close. The concentrated essence of centuries of bloodline and power converging into a single moment, a single person who'd been hidden, suppressed, forgotten. Every wolf in the hall dropped to one knee. The movement was involuntary, instinctive. Even Dominic fell, his legs buckling despite his desperate attempt to remain standing. Even Tiffany, who'd been smiling seconds before, now pressed her forehead to the cracked floor in terrified submission. Every wolf bowed, except Clarara. She rose slowly, shakily, but she rose. The markings blazed brighter, crawling up her neck like living vines, across her face, through her hair that lifted as if caught in an invisible wind. Her eyes glowed pure gold, not the amber of common wolves, but the metallic gold of ancient royalty, of bloodlines that predated the current pack system by thousands of years. The unranked Omega was gone. Something far older stood in her place. "Impossible," someone whispered. "Royal markings," another breathed. She's of the old blood." Clarara looked down at her hands, at the glowing script that covered her skin, and felt something slot into place in her consciousness. Memories that weren't quite hers. Knowledge she shouldn't possess. Power that had been locked away, suppressed, hidden behind magical barriers, strong enough to fool an entire pack for 18 years. She looked at Dominic, still kneeling, his face pale. "You were saying something about bloodline?" Her voice came out layered, harmonics of power woven through each syllable. The doors burst open, the ceiling above the entrance hall shattered, stone and timber exploding outward as something descended from above. Not something, someone. A helicopter, sleek, black, military grade, descended into the courtyard beyond the hall, its rotors whipping the ceremonial banners into a frenzy. Footsteps echoed through the ruined entrance. A man entered, tall, silver-haired, despite appearing only in his early 50s, eyes sharp with the kind of authority that came from decades of command. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than the pack house, and he moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been challenged and never would be. The remaining windows shattered as his presence swept into the room. "Forgive my lateness," he said calmly, his cultured voice carrying despite the chaos. "Traffic in the Alps is simply dreadful this time of year." He stopped at the edge of the dais, surveying the scene with barely concealed satisfaction. "I am Lord Sebastian Valerius, High Regent of the Continental Pack Alliance, Keeper of the Old Laws, and Supreme Arbiter of Royal Bloodlines." The name struck like thunder. Wolves gasped. Some outright flinched. The Valerius family didn't just rule a pack. They ruled the international wolf world. Ancient royalty. The bloodline that every alpha answered to, whether they admitted it or not. "And I have come," Sebastian continued, his eyes finding Clarara, "to collect my niece." The word hung in the air like a grenade. Niece. Dominic's face went from pale to chalk white. "My apologies for the deception," Sebastian said, not sounding apologetic at all. "Clarara's true identity has been protected. Hidden for her safety after a rather unfortunate incident involving her parents 18 years ago." He moved toward Clarara with measured steps, then did something that made the entire hall gasp in unison. He bowed, deeply, with the formal reverence reserved for royalty of the highest order. "Princess Clara Ara Genevieve Valerius," he said formally, "last surviving heir of the lunar throne. The moon goddess welcomes you home." Dominic fell forward, catching himself on shaking hands. His rejection hadn't just insulted an Omega. He'd rejected a princess. The silence that followed Sebastian's declaration was absolute. Then chaos erupted. The crowd surged forward, wolves trying to approach Clara Ara, to apologize, to pledge loyalty, to somehow undo 18 years of cruelty in a single moment of desperate groveling. Sebastian raised one hand. "Stand down." The command wasn't loud, but it hit like a physical force. Every wolf froze mid-motion, held in place by the weight of his authority. "You will remain where you are," Sebastian continued, his cultured voice taking on edges of steel. "You will be silent, and you will await judgment." He turned to Dominic, who still knelt on the cracked marble, trembling. "Alpha Sterling." Sebastian's tone could have frozen water. "Do you understand what you've done?" Dominic couldn't speak. His mouth worked, but no sound emerged. "Allow me to clarify." Sebastian began pacing, his hands clasped behind his back like a professor delivering a lecture. "By Lycan law, Article 7, Section 3, the rejection of a true mate bond is considered unfortunate, regrettable, sometimes even necessary for political reasons." Hope flickered in Dominic's eyes. "However," Sebastian continued, "Article 2, Section 9 clearly states that the knowing rejection of a royal mate bond constitutes high treason against the Continental Alliance, punishable by death." The hope died. "I didn't know," Dominic gasped out. "I swear I had no idea she was—" "Ignorance is not innocence," Sebastian cut him off. "You felt the bond. You recognized it. And you chose political expedience over sacred law. The fact that you didn't know her rank makes it worse, not better. You rejected your true mate for someone you chose, someone more convenient." He turned to address the crowd. "Let this serve as a lesson. Rank means nothing to fate. The moon goddess does not care about your political alliances or your ambitious plans. She grants bonds as she sees fit, and to reject one is to reject her will." "Please," Dominic whispered. "Please, I'll accept the bond. I'll—" "Too late." Clara Ara's voice cut through his pleading. Every eye turned to her. She stood straighter now, the initial shock wearing off, replaced by something harder. The markings on her skin had faded slightly, but remained visible, pulsing gently with each breath. "You made your choice," she said quietly, "in front of your entire pack. You called me trash. Unworthy. A mistake. You don't get to take that back because my bloodline suddenly makes me valuable." "I was wrong," Dominic said desperately. "I was so wrong, please." "Yes, you were." Clara Ara looked at Sebastian. "What happens now?" Sebastian's expression was unreadable. "By law, Alpha Sterling faces execution. His pack will be absorbed, his territory redistributed. Everyone who laughed at your humiliation, who joined in your mockery, will be judged." Gasps and sobs erupted from the crowd. Tiffany had gone catatonic with terror. "However," Sebastian continued, "as the wronged party, you have the right to show mercy. The decision is yours, Princess." Clara Ara looked at Dominic. really looked at him, saw the terror, the regret, the desperate desire to undo the last hour, but she also remembered 18 years of being invisible, of being nobody, of being trash to be swept away. "I need time," she said finally. I can't think here." "Of course." Sebastian gestured, and suddenly the room was filled with guards in black tactical gear, materializing from the shadows like they'd been waiting. "Secure the territory. No one leaves until I authorize it. Alpha Sterling, you are under house arrest pending formal trial." "But be grateful you're breathing," Sebastian said mildly. "That can change." He offered his arm to Clara Ara. "My dear, shall we?" She looked around the grand hall one last time, at the wolves who'd tormented her, at the Alpha who'd destroyed her, at the life she'd thought was her destiny. Then she took Sebastian's arm and walked out, leaving silence and terror in her wake. The unranked Omega was dead. Princess Clara Ara Genevieve Valerius had been born. The helicopter ride to Sebastian's private estate was surreal. Clara Ara sat in silence, wrapped in a cashmere blanket someone had provided, watching the world blur beneath them. Mountains gave way to forests, forests to valleys, valleys to a sprawling compound that looked like it belonged in a Bond film. The Valerius estate. She'd heard whispers of it, of course. Every wolf had. The seat of royal power, where the old laws were written and rewritten, where the fate of packs was decided over brandy and centuries-old grievances. They landed on a helipad that overlooked a lake so perfect it looked painted. "Welcome home," Sebastian said warmly as he helped her down. Home. The word felt foreign. The estate was magnificent, all sweeping architecture and tasteful luxury that whispered of old money and older power. Staff appeared and disappeared like ghosts, anticipating needs before they were voiced. A suite of rooms had been prepared for her. Not a bedroom, a suite. Sitting room, bedroom, private bath with a tub that could fit 5 people, a walk-in closet already filled with designer clothes in exactly her size. "How did you—" she began. "We've been watching over you for years," Sebastian said gently, "ensuring your safety from a distance. I'm only sorry we couldn't act sooner, but the threats against your family, they required absolute secrecy." "My family." Clara Ara sank onto a velvet chaise. "You said my parents died. What happened?" Sebastian's expression darkened. "That, my dear, is a long and painful story. One best told after you've rested. You've had a traumatic evening." "I want to know now." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Your father was Crown Prince Marcus Valerius, my younger brother. Your mother was Queen Genevieve of the Northern Territories. Their union was controversial but powerful. Together they commanded more territory and loyalty than any royal couple in 5 centuries. And someone wanted them dead." Sebastian poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "A coordinated attack. Assassins struck simultaneously at 3 locations. Your parents died protecting you. You were barely 2 months old." Clara Ara felt numb. "Who did it?" "We never found concrete proof. Many enemies, many suspects. The investigation is ongoing." He moved to the window. "I became your guardian, but the threat remained, so I did what I had to do. I hid you, suppressed your scent, your aura, your markings, placed you with the Blackwood Pack under a false identity. They were told you were a charity case, nothing more." 18 years, Clara Ara whispered. 18 years of hell. Necessary hell. Sebastian's voice was firm. "Would you prefer to have been murdered as a child?" "I'd prefer to have had a choice." "You were an infant. You had no choice to give." He turned back to her. "But now you're safe. Now we can announce your return properly. You'll be trained, educated, prepared to take your rightful place as heir to the throne." Something about his tone made her wolf stir uneasily. "What throne?" Clara asked carefully. "I thought we didn't have a monarchy anymore." "An oversight will correct," Sebastian smiled. "The packs need guidance, strong leadership. The council system is chaos. Too many voices, too little action. With you as queen, properly advised, of course, we can restore order." Red flags were waving in Clara Ara's mind, but exhaustion was winning. The bond rejection had drained her, and the awakening had left her feeling hollow. "I need to sleep," she said. "Of course. We'll begin your training tomorrow." Sebastian moved toward the door. "Oh, and Clara Ara, the guards are for your protection. Please don't try to leave the compound without escort, for your safety." The door closed with a soft click, and Clara Ara heard the lock engage. She was in a golden cage, and she was beginning to suspect Sebastian was a jailer, not a savior. Training started at dawn. Clara Ara woke to find training clothes laid out, expensive athletic wear that fit perfectly. A knock at the door announced breakfast, a spread of gourmet food she barely touched. Then the lessons began, combat training in a state-of-the-art facility, diplomacy lessons with stern tutors who corrected every word, etiquette classes that made her previous life as a servant seem almost relaxed by comparison. History, politics, languages, strategy. "A queen must be prepared for everything," Sebastian reminded her constantly. But something was wrong. The training was designed to break her down, not build her up. Every instructor was cold, clinical. Every lesson emphasized obedience, duty, sacrifice. "A queen serves her people," they'd say. But what they meant was, a queen obeys her advisors. And the combat training was even stranger. Her instructor, a scarred warrior named Victor, pushed her past exhaustion every day. She could feel her power trying to rise, the same energy that had shattered the Grand Hall. But something was suppressing it. Every time she reached for her wolf, she hit a wall. "Focus," Victor would bark. "Channel it properly." But she couldn't. The markings on her skin had dimmed. Her enhanced senses were muted. Even her strength felt reduced, like she was moving through water. "It's the adjustment period," Sebastian explained when she asked. "Your power was dormant for so long, it needs time to stabilize. The dampening is temporary for your safety." But her wolf didn't believe him. Neither did she. A week passed, then 2. The estate was beautiful, but she was a prisoner. Guards shadowed her everywhere. Communication with the outside world was temporarily restricted for security. She wasn't allowed to return to Blackwood Pack. She wasn't allowed to see Dominic, though part of her didn't want to anyway. She was isolated, controlled, shaped into something that fit Sebastian's vision. And the more he talked about the restoration, the more detailed his plans became. He spoke of reforming the pack system, of centralizing power, of necessary changes that would require temporary measures that sounded alarmingly like dictatorship. "The packs have grown too independent," he'd say over dinner. "Too chaotic. They need firm guidance." "They need a tyrant?" Clara asked one night. Sebastian's smile never wavered. "They need order." In the dead hours of night, when she was supposed to be sleeping, Clara began exploring her suite, looking for, she wasn't sure what, evidence, truth, an escape route. What she found was far more disturbing. Hidden behind a loose stone in the bathroom, she discovered papers, old papers, documents stamped with official seals, records of her parents' assassination. And there, in neat handwriting, was a name she recognized. Sebastian Valerius had signed off on the security detail that was supposed to protect her parents. The detail that had been mysteriously absent when the assassins struck. Her hands shook as she read further. Bank transfers, large sums of money, payments made to unknown accounts in the weeks before the attack, Sebastian's signature on every transfer. The truth hit like ice water. Her uncle hadn't saved her. He'd killed her parents. And he'd been planning to use her ever since. Back at Blackwood Pack, Dominic Sterling was a dead man walking. House arrest meant exactly that. Confined to his private quarters, stripped of alpha duties, awaiting a trial he knew he'd lose. The rejected mate bond ached constantly, a phantom limb that throbbed with every heartbeat. He deserved it. Goddess, he deserved worse. But something wasn't sitting right about any of this. Sebastian Valerius had moved with military precision. The guards who'd secured the territory weren't normal security. They were soldiers, the kind who followed orders without question and made people disappear. And Clara, he'd felt her power that night, witnessed the awakening. She was no weak Omega. She was a force of nature. So why hadn't she been back? Why the complete silence? His beta, Marcus, risked everything to slip into his quarters one night. "Something's wrong," Marcus whispered urgently. "Really wrong." "What do you mean?" "I've been asking questions, quietly, about Sebastian Valerius, about the Valerius family. Dominic, there are rumors, disappearances, packs that challenged him just vanished." Dominic sat up straighter. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that get people killed for speaking them." Marcus pulled out a tablet. "Look at this." Princess Clara was supposedly hidden for her protection, right? But there's no record of any ongoing threat. No active investigations, no suspects. It's like the whole thing was fabricated. Why would Sebastian lie? Because, Marcus pulled up another file. Because 18 years ago, Prince Marcus Valerius was about to challenge Sebastian for control of the family. Marcus had more support, more legitimacy. He was going to remove Sebastian from power. Dominic felt ice in his veins. And then he died. Along with his mate and half their security detail, very convenient for Sebastian. They stared at each other as the horrifying implications settled. He killed his own brother, Dominic breathed, and now he has the brother's daughter, the legitimate heir. If something happens to her after she's publicly acknowledged, Sebastian becomes regent indefinitely. We have to warn her. How? Marcus demanded. This place is locked down. Communication is monitored. She's in Switzerland, surrounded by his guards, and we're trapped here. Dominic stood, pacing. There has to be a way. There is one person who might help, Marcus said reluctantly. If you're willing to beg. Who? Tiffany Rochute. Dominic's face twisted. She's part of this. No, she's not. Her father is, and he's pissed. Sebastian promised him the alliance, then pulled it away. Silvercrest has resources, connections, but you'd have to convince Tiffany to convince him. It was humiliating, but if Clara was in danger, set up a meeting. Tiffany arrived escorted by guards, looking pale but composed. They faced each other in awkward silence. You rejected your true mate for me, she finally said. Then I lost everything anyway. How's that feel? Deserved, Dominic said honestly. I was wrong. About all of it. But this isn't about us anymore. Then what is it about? He told her, showed her Marcus's research, explained the danger. Tiffany listened, her expression unreadable. Why should I help? She asked when he finished. Why should I care if the princess lives or dies? Because she's innocent. Because she's been used and manipulated her entire life. And because if Sebastian gets away with this, he won't stop. Your pack could be next. Tiffany was silent for a long time. Then, my father has a contact. A witch named Althea. She specializes in unconventional solutions. If I can get you to her, can you do what needs to be done? Yes. Even though it means you'll probably die? Dominic thought of Clara Ara's face when he'd rejected her. The pain, the betrayal. Yes. Tiffany nodded slowly. Then we have a deal. But Dominic, if we survive this, we are never speaking again. Agreed. Althea's cottage existed in the liminal spaces between territories, answering to no pack, protected by magic older than the current borders. Getting there required breaking Dominic out of house arrest, bribing guards, and calling in every favor Marcus and Tiffany could manage. They arrived at midnight under a new moon. The witch was ancient, or appeared to be, or perhaps had chosen that appearance for the evening. With magical beings, you could never quite tell. I know why you're here, she said before Dominic could speak. The rejected mate seeks redemption. The princess trapped in gold. The uncle who murders his way to power. Can you help? Dominic asked. Help, perhaps, but magic has a price, Alpha. What will you pay? Anything. Anything is a dangerous word. Althea moved around her cottage, pulling bottles and herbs with practiced efficiency. To break Sebastian's wards, to pierce his defenses, to deliver truth where lies have lived for 18 years, that requires sacrifice. Name it. She turned to him, eyes glowing. Your alpha power. Give it to me. Let me bind it into the spell, and I can give you one chance. One moment where truth cannot be denied, where deceptions shatter, where the real traitor is exposed. Dominic felt the weight of it. His power was everything. His identity. His birthright. Without it, he'd be nothing. He thought of Clara. Done. Dominic, no, Marcus began. Done, he repeated firmly. Althea smiled. Then we begin. The ritual took hours. Painful hours where Dominic felt his very essence being drawn out, woven into a complex spell that glowed with silver fire. This will show truth, Althea explained as she worked. Absolute, undeniable truth. No lies can survive in its presence. No deceptions can hide. Whoever hears it will know, in their bones, that every word is real. How do I deliver it? With this. She handed him a small, ornate locket. Inside was a recording device. Your mate must wear this at her coronation. When Sebastian attempts to crown her, the truth will emerge. His own words, his own plans, laid bare for all to hear. But we need evidence first, Marcus pointed out. We need Sebastian's confession. Ah, Althea said softly. That's where the second spell comes in. She pulled out an ancient recording device, so old it looked like it belonged in a museum. This was your mother's, she told Dominic. Queen Genevieve knew she was in danger. Before she died, she recorded a message. The truth about Sebastian, about his plans, about everything. She pressed play. Queen Genevieve's voice filled the cottage, young, vibrant, terrified. If you're hearing this, I'm dead. Sebastian Valerius orchestrated it. He's been planning this for years. He wants the throne, and he'll kill anyone who stands in his way. Marcus and I discovered his plot 3 days ago. We have evidence. Bank transfers, communications, everything. But it won't matter if we're dead. Someone needs to protect Clara. Someone needs to stop him. The evidence is hidden in the... Static. The recording ended. The rest was corrupted, Althea said. But this is enough. Combined with the truth spell, it will be irrefutable. Dominic held the device like it was made of glass. How do we get this to Clara? That, Althea said, is the hard part. Sebastian's estate was a fortress, but fortresses had weaknesses. Tiffany's father, Alpha Rochute, called in favors from Silvercrest's intelligence network. Within 48 hours, they had blueprints, guard schedules, camera placements, and shift rotations. The coronation is in 3 days, Marcus reported. Sebastian's moving fast. If we don't act now, Clara will be crowned under his control, and then he makes her disappear quietly. Dominic finished. An accident. A tragedy. And Sebastian becomes regent permanently. The plan was insane. Tiffany would attend the coronation as a dignitary. She'd bring the locket as a gift. The security wouldn't suspect her. Silvercrest was a powerful ally, and Sebastian wanted their continued support. But first, they needed to get the recording to Clara. And for that, they needed someone who could slip past magical wards. I know someone, Althea said. A raven. Old magic, older than Sebastian's wards. It can carry a message. She whistled, and a massive raven materialized on her windowsill. Take this to the princess, Althea commanded, tying the recording device to its leg with enchanted thread. Find her alone. Trust no one else. The raven cawed once and vanished. In Switzerland, Clara Ara was preparing for the coronation with a sense of mounting dread. She'd found more evidence, more documents. Sebastian's plans were extensive. The coronation was just the beginning. After that came reforms that would strip individual packs of autonomy, centralize all power under royal decree, and effectively make Sebastian the dictator of the entire wolf world, with her as a puppet queen. She had to escape. But how? The guards never left. The wards around the estate were impenetrable. Her power was still suppressed. The dampening spell Sebastian claimed was temporary, showing no signs of fading. She was trapped. Then, in the dead of night, 2 days before the coronation, a raven crashed through her window. It shouldn't have been possible. The wards should have stopped it. But old magic worked differently. Clara Ara pulled the device from its leg with shaking hands. When her mother's voice emerged, she wept. The truth she'd suspected, confirmed. Sebastian killed her parents. Sebastian planned to kill her. She was living in the house of her family's murderer. The raven cawed softly and transformed, not back to a bird, but into smoke that coalesced into a written message. Wear the locket at coronation. Dominic Sterling is coming. Trust him. Trust Dominic? The man who'd rejected her publicly, who'd called her trash, who'd destroyed her in front of hundreds? But he'd risked everything to send her this truth, and right now, he was the only ally she had. The day of the coronation dawned cold and clear. The Valerius estate had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, or a nightmare depending on your perspective. Thousands of guests from across the wolf world, dignitaries, alphas, nobility, all gathered to witness history. The return of the lunar throne. Clara Ara stood in her suite, staring at herself in the mirror. The gown was magnificent, silver and white, covered in crystals that caught the light. Her hair had been styled into an elaborate updo. Makeup had transformed her face into something almost unrecognizable. She looked like a queen. She felt like a sacrifice. Sebastian entered without knocking, as always. "You look perfect," he said warmly. "Your parents would be so proud." The lie was so smooth it almost sounded true. "I'm ready," Clara Ara said quietly. She wasn't. But she had no choice. The ceremony took place in the estate's grand hall, a space that made Blackwood's hall look like a closet. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars, gold leaf covering every surface, hundreds of guests in formal attire, and at the center, a throne. Ancient, powerful, waiting. Clara walked down the aisle on Sebastian's arm, her heart pounding. She scanned the crowd, looking for... There, Tiffany Rochute, standing near the front, looking pale but determined. Their eyes met briefly. Tiffany gave the tiniest nod. The locket was in play. The ceremony began with traditional rites, speeches about legacy and duty, prayers to the moon goddess, the whole elaborate production designed to make this seem legitimate, ordained, inevitable. Then came the crowning itself. "Princess Clara Ara Genevieve Valerius," the high priest intoned. "Do you accept the burden of the crown? Do you swear to lead with wisdom, rule with justice, and protect your people above all else?" This was it. the moment of no return. Clara Ara looked at Sebastian. His smile was confident, triumphant. He'd won. Or so he thought. "I accept," she said clearly. The priest lifted the crown, an ancient piece supposedly worn by the first Wolf Queen 3,000 years ago. "Then by the power vested in me by the old laws and the moon goddess herself." The locket activated. Light exploded from Tiffany's position, spreading like a shockwave across the hall. Althea's truth spell. Absolute, undeniable, irrefutable. And Queen Genevieve's voice rang out, crystal clear, heard by every wolf in attendance. "If you're hearing this, I'm dead. Sebastian Valerius orchestrated it. He's been planning this for years. He wants the throne, and he'll kill anyone who stands in his way." The hall erupted. Sebastian's face went from confident to confused to furious in seconds. "What is this?" he demanded. "Stop this recording. This is a forgery." But the truth spell didn't allow denials. Anyone who tried to lie, to deceive, to manipulate the truth found their own words stuck in their throats. Queen Genevieve continued, detailing bank transfers, assassination plans, everything. Then Dominic Sterling stepped forward from the crowd. "I have additional evidence," he announced. "Documents recovered from sealed archives, bank records, communications, all of it proving that Sebastian Valerius murdered his own brother and sister-in-law to steal the throne." Guards moved toward him, but Dominic didn't stop. "He's kept Clara Ara prisoner, suppressed her power with illegal dampening spells, planned to use her coronation as a cover for consolidating absolute control, then eliminate her once she'd served her purpose." The truth spell amplified his words, ensuring everyone knew they were real. Sebastian snarled, "Seize him! Seize all of them!" But his guards hesitated, because truth was a powerful thing, and they'd just heard it from a dead queen and a desperate alpha. Clara Ara stepped down from the throne. "Is it true?" she asked Sebastian quietly. "All of it?" The truth spell forced honesty. Sebastian tried to speak, tried to spin it, tried to justify. "Yes," he finally choked out. "I killed them. They were weak, sentimental. They would have destroyed everything our family built. I did what was necessary." Gasps echoed through the hall. "And me?" Clara Ara asked. "What was your plan for me?" "You would have been useful," Sebastian said through gritted teeth, the spell dragging each word out. "For a few years, long enough to legitimize my rule. Then, accidents happen. You're young, inexperienced. No one would question a tragic mistake." The admission sealed his fate. Every alpha in the room heard a confession of regicide, familial murder, and conspiracy. By Lycan law, there was only one punishment. "Guards," Clara Ara said softly, "arrest Sebastian Valerius for high treason, murder, and crimes against the royal line." The guards, free from his control now that the truth was revealed, moved as one. Sebastian fought, called on his own power, his own strength, but truth was stronger, and he was alone. They took him down in seconds, binding him with silver chains. As they dragged him away, Sebastian locked eyes with Clara Ara. "You'll fail," he hissed. "You're weak, unprepared. This world will eat you alive." "Maybe," Clara Ara said, "but at least I won't be a murderer." He was gone. Silence fell over the hall. Then, one by one, the wolves began to kneel. Not in fear, in recognition. The real queen had finally come home. The aftermath of the coronation was chaos. Sebastian's arrest triggered an international investigation. Packs he'd intimidated came forward with evidence. His corruption went deeper than anyone had imagined. Decades of manipulation, assassination, and stolen power. The Valerius estate was locked down. Sebastian himself was imprisoned in a specially warded cell, awaiting trial before the Continental Council. And Clara Ara was suddenly, unexpectedly, actually queen. The first thing she did was remove the dampening spell. It had been woven into a bracelet Sebastian gave her, disguised as a welcome gift. The moment she took it off, power flooded back into her body like a dam breaking. The markings blazed to life. Her senses sharpened. Her wolf, silent for so long, roared with joy. She was whole again. The second thing she did was call Dominic Sterling to a private audience. He arrived escorted by guards, looking exhausted. The ritual with Althea had drained him significantly. His alpha power was still there, but diminished. He'd never fully recover what he'd sacrificed. They stood facing each other in the estate's library, surrounded by centuries of books and uncomfortable silence. "You saved my life," Clara said finally. "I almost destroyed it first," Dominic replied quietly. "Clara, Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't apologize. We both know words won't fix what happened." "Then what will?" "Time. Maybe nothing." She moved to the window, looking out over the Alps. "You rejected me. Publicly. Cruelly. You called me trash. You chose political expedience over a mate bond. Those are facts." "I know. But you also risked everything to save me. You gave up your power. You broke Lycan law. You could have died." She turned back to him. "Why?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was wrong," he said finally. "About everything. I thought strength meant dominance, power meant control, being alpha meant never showing weakness, so when the bond snapped, when I felt that pull toward you, I panicked. You weren't part of the plan. You didn't fit the image I'd built. So you rejected me. So I rejected my own heart." He stepped closer. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Clara Ara. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking to rebuild the bond. I know that's impossible. I needed you to know that you were never the mistake." "I was." The confession hung between them. Clara Ara felt the phantom ache where the bond had been. It would never fully heal. Rejected mate bonds left scars that lasted lifetimes. But something about his honesty, his genuine remorse, eased the pain slightly. "The council wants to execute you," she said quietly. "Treason for rejecting a royal mate. It's still on the books." Dominic nodded. "I know. I'm commuting the sentence." His head jerked up. "What?" "You'll lose the Blackwood Pack. That's non-negotiable. But you can live." She met his eyes. "You'll serve as an advisor to my court. You have experience I need. knowledge of the pack system, and you've proven you'll do the right thing, even when it costs you everything. Clara, I can't. You can and you will. Steel entered her voice. Because I'm your queen, and I'm telling you to. Because the wolf world needs good people, and despite everything, you're capable of being one. And because, she paused, because I need allies I can trust. And strangely enough, I trust you more than most. You've already paid the highest price. You have nothing left to gain from betraying me. Dominic stared at her, something like awe in his expression. You're going to be an incredible queen, he said softly. I'm going to try. She offered her hand. Do we have an accord? He took it. Not a mate bond, not romance, but perhaps eventually friendship. We do, Your Majesty. The official coronation took place 3 weeks later. Proper this time, legitimate, with Clara in full control. The high priest performed the rites. The crown was placed on her head by her own choice. And when she stood before the assembled packs, power radiating from every pore, nobody doubted her right to rule. I am Queen Clara Genevieve Valerius, she announced. I was hidden for 18 years, suppressed, made into nothing, treated as trash to be swept away. But I survived, and I learned something important in those years of servitude. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I learned what it's like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of those stronger than you, to be judged by circumstances of birth rather than character. And I swear to you now, my reign will be different. She laid out her vision. Not Sebastian's dictatorship, but something new. A reformed council system with royal oversight, rights for omegas and unranked wolves, protection for the vulnerable. Justice that applied equally to all wolves regardless of status. The old hierarchy is broken, she declared. It allowed people like Sebastian to thrive. It allowed cruelty in the name of order. It needs to change. Not everyone agreed. Change never came easy. But when the Queen spoke with the voice of someone who'd lived at the bottom, who'd survived the worst the system could offer and still chose mercy over vengeance, people listened. The coronation ended with a ball, traditional, elegant, everything it should be. Clara danced the formal dances with dignitaries and alphas, playing the political game she was still learning. Then, as midnight approached, she slipped away. She found herself in the estate gardens under the full moon, finally alone. Her wolf stirred contentedly, at peace, at home. I thought you might be out here. She turned to find Marcus, Dominic's former beta, approaching respectfully. Marcus, is something wrong? No, Your Majesty, I wanted to thank you for sparing Dominic, for giving him a chance to make things right. He earned it. He did. Marcus hesitated. And I wanted you to know, there are a lot of us who support your vision, who want things to change. You're not alone in this. Clara smiled. Thank you. I'm going to need all the support I can get. Marcus bowed and withdrew, leaving her alone with the moon once more. She thought about her parents, about Queen Genevieve, who'd died protecting her, about Prince Marcus, who'd challenged corruption. They would have fought for the same changes she was making now. I hope I'm making you proud, she whispered to the night. The moon seemed to shine brighter in response. Tiffany Rochute requested an audience the next day. They met in one of the estate's smaller sitting rooms, far less formal than the throne room, which Clara Ara appreciated. "I'm returning to Silver Crest tomorrow," Tiffany said without preamble. "My father needs me, and honestly, I need to be away from all of this." "I understand. But before I go, I wanted to say," Tiffany struggled with the words, "I'm sorry for how I treated you at Blackwood, for laughing when Dominic rejected you, for being so caught up in ambition that I forgot basic decency." Clara Ara studied her. Tiffany looked genuine, exhausted but genuine. "Why did you help?" she asked. "You could have stayed out of it. Let me die."
"Secured your alliance with whoever came next."
"Because I looked at you that night," Tiffany said quietly, "and I saw someone being used exactly like I was being used, a pawn in someone else's game, and I realized that's all we'd ever be if we kept playing by their rules. So I chose differently." "Thank you," Clara Ara said sincerely. "If you ever need anything." "I won't," Tiffany smiled slightly. "But I appreciate the offer. For what it's worth, Your Majesty, I think you're going to change the world. In a good way." They parted not as friends, but as women who'd survived the same storm. It was enough. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Change never does. But a year after the coronation, the wolf world was undeniably different. The Omega Rights Act had passed, granting equal protection under law regardless of rank. Servants had legal recourse against abuse. Unranked wolves could own property, hold positions, live lives beyond survival. The council system had been reformed. Less chaos, more accountability. Royal oversight prevented the kind of corruption Sebastian had thrived on, but individual packs maintained their autonomy. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever would be. But it was better. Clara Ara stood on the balcony of the Valerius estate, watching the sun set over the Alps. She'd made this place her own over the past year. Less fortress, more home. The staff were employees now, not servants, with fair wages and actual days off. "Your Majesty?" A knock at the door. One of her advisors, a young Omega named Sarah, who'd been promoted based on merit, not bloodline. "The delegation from the Eastern Territories is here." "Thank you, Sarah. I'll be down shortly." Always more work, more diplomacy, more late nights and early mornings and decisions that affected thousands of lives. But she wouldn't trade it because she was making a difference. Dominic had proven invaluable over the past year. His advice on pack dynamics, his willingness to admit when he was wrong, his genuine desire to atone for his past had earned him respect. He'd never regain his full alpha power, but he'd found a different kind of strength. They weren't friends, exactly. The rejection still hurt. The broken bond still ached. But they'd found a way to work together, to respect each other. Maybe that was enough. Tiffany sent letters occasionally. Silver Crest was thriving under her co-leadership with her father. She'd found her own path, separate from the ambition that had once consumed her. And Sebastian stood trial 6 months ago. The evidence was overwhelming. The council found him guilty on all counts. He was executed at dawn on a Tuesday, his last words a curse that Clara Ara would fail. She was determined to prove him wrong. "Your Majesty!" Another voice. Marcus hurrying onto the balcony. "You need to see this." He handed her a tablet showing a news feed. Unranked wolf elected alpha in Southern Pack. First in history. Clara Ara read the article, a smile spreading across her face. Change. Real change. "They're saying you inspired it," Marcus said. "The unranked queen who survived rejection and rebuilt the world." "I didn't rebuild anything," Clara Ara said quietly. "I just showed them it was possible. They did the rest themselves." She looked out over the mountains again, at the territories spreading in every direction, hundreds of packs, millions of wolves, all of them looking to her for guidance, not as a servant, not as trash, as their queen. The unranked Omega who'd been rejected, broken, and left for dead had risen from the ashes stronger than anyone imagined, not through vengeance, through justice, not through cruelty, through mercy, not through dominance, through wisdom. "I was never the mistake," she whispered, remembering that terrible night 1 year ago. "I was the warning. A warning that the old ways were ending, that rank didn't define worth, that even those deemed worthless could rise." Her wolf howled in satisfaction, the sound echoing across the Alps. And somewhere, in the realm beyond life, her parents heard. And they were proud. 5 years later. Final scene. The memorial garden had been Clara Ara's idea, a place to honor those lost to the old system, those who died because of rank, because of cruelty, because they'd been deemed unworthy of protection. Her parents' names were carved in stone at the center, but surrounding them were hundreds more, thousands, every Omega executed for minor infractions, every unranked wolf killed for sport, every victim of the hierarchy's cruelty. "Never forget," the plaque read. "Never again." Clara Ara visited often, especially on hard days when the weight of the crown felt too heavy. Today she wasn't alone. A small girl stood beside her, no more than 7 years old, with dark curls and eyes that occasionally flashed gold. "Mama," the girl asked, "is it true you used to be a servant?" Clara Ara knelt to her daughter's level. "Yes, sweetheart, I was." "And Papa rejected you?" "He did. No point in hiding the truth." Dominic visited occasionally as an advisor, always respectful, always professional. The girl knew him as Uncle Dominic, the man who'd helped save her mother's life. Why? Because he made a mistake. People do that sometimes. The important thing is what they do after. The girl considered this seriously. Did he fix it? He tried his best to, and I forgave him. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. Her daughter, Princess Genevieve, named for the grandmother she'd never met, looked up at the memorial. "When I'm queen," she announced with a child's absolute certainty, "nobody will ever be hurt for being different." Clara pulled her close. "That's my hope, too." They stood together in the garden as the sun set, queen and princess, mother and daughter. The bloodline had been preserved, but more importantly, the lesson had been learned. Rank meant nothing without character. Power meant nothing without compassion. And no wolf, no matter how low, was ever worthless. The hierarchy had fallen, a new world had risen, and Clara Holloway, unranked Omega, rejected mate, risen queen, had lived to see it. She had survived, she had conquered, she had transformed pain into purpose. "Come on," she told her daughter, taking her small hand. "Let's go home." They walked back toward the palace together, the setting sun painting everything gold. Behind them, the memorial stones gleamed, a reminder, a warning, a promise. The wolf who'd been rejected had risen, and she'd changed everything. "Thank you for experiencing this journey from servant to queen, from rejection to redemption, from silence to sovereignty." Clarara's story reminds us that our circumstances don't define our worth and our past doesn't determine our future. The strongest wolves aren't always the ones who never fall. They're the ones who rise again and again and again until they transform the very ground they once bled on. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like, subscribe, and share. For more dark fantasy romance and rejected mate stories, check out the playlist below. Remember, you are never the mistake. You are the warning that change is coming.